There we go. Okay. I just got a link from Julie and Carol looking for the group. Hang on just a second. I'll give it. 7, 9. There we go. There we go. So Carol and Julie are Julie Kaufman and Carol Jeanette will probably be joining us in just a minute too. I love a group of women. That's great. That's great. Smart, holy women. Well, thanks for joining us. A couple questions just for housekeeping. Has anyone not been able to get a book yet? Or we all have the text? Okay, because somebody found out in the Sunday class that Jefferson County Library has an ebook that you don't pay for. So if you want to grab it that way, does the ebook mean that it's also an audio book or not necessarily?
No, I'm the one that brought that up. You can load it on your phone through Hoopla, or your iPad through Hoopla.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very
through Hoopla, but they didn't have the sound recording one, so
okay.
They didn't have an audio book.
And you looked on Jeffco?
Yeah, I loaded it from Jeffco. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thanks so much, Jen. Hey, Julie, you got it on there, okay?
Yeah, I missed the link somewhere.
Yeah, sorry. I scoured the Advent page and in fact it wasn't there, but some folks went to their Friday e-blast, so my apologies. But I'm glad you knew how to reach out.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Oh no, you're fine. Did you get a chance to get a book, Julie? Okay.
I did.
Okay. So there's kind of two different ways to sometimes do a study with a book and a sermon series. And sometimes we've had people kind of pre-read and then we go into the sermon topic, that we'll be doing on Sunday related to the topic. The way the dates of this study work, we're going to actually kind of talk about the topic and then get a chance to read about it in the pages for this week. And then the sermon theme on Sunday will kind of be that same material too. So it's kind of fun because you're kind of engaging and experiencing the book and the material in those three different ways, from our time today, the way you read and kind of take this in, and then also on a Sunday morning. Matt Rawle's a pastor in Louisiana, depending on where you're from. And I find if you started to read all his stuff, it's kind of stream of consciousness. and I'm like, what, how'd you go there after you were just there? And so his writing style may be a little bumpy for some folks, but he does a good job of kind of helping us engage the theme of how A Christmas Carol and the theology of Advent and our experience of Advent can find some really neat points of intersection. So I hope you enjoy reading it. Luckily, it's not real heavy, but for this to start today till next Monday, if you read the page 1 to 48, that's the most reading of this book. And it's kind of the bah humbug section of the book. And then if you look at the table of contents, then it goes into the three ghostly visits, if you will: Christmas past, Christmas present, and Christmas future. And those will be the topics that will launch at the next class, if that makes sense, for each week. Okay. So for December 4th, if you want to read page 1 through 48, if you haven't had a chance to start already, and then each of the single chapters around the different ghosts will be each following week, if that makes sense. So that the plan is that we're meeting tonight and then December 4th, 11th, and 18th. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So thanks for joining us. I'm eager for us to go around and introduce ourselves, because every time we have a class like this, there's always somebody that we're getting to know for the first time, and that's part of the fun of it, I think. And we just meet for an hour and just some Zoom protocol. If it's easier to mute until you talk, that's fine. But if you want to, you don't have to mute as long as you don't have ambient noise around you. If my dog starts barking, I'll mute. And then down below, if there's a question that you have that you want to put in the chat, but we're also a small enough group that you can just ask if something comes up. We are recording these sessions so that if people can't come to every one, they can go back, and we will put these and the Zoom link up on the website under the Advent page, so you can actually find those. Any other kind of protocol questions for doing Zoom? I think this crew's pretty seasoned in Zooms now, right? So we don't have to do too much of that. But just for the purpose of getting started, would love you to introduce yourself, and I'll just call your name so that we can go around the screen that way, and share a favorite Christmas song or a reading that you look forward to hearing each Christmas, whether that's because of a nostalgia experience in your family, or you always want to hear the scripture text at Christmas time, or a favorite hymn. And because our group's not as big, we can do this. Why does that song or reading hold meaning for you? So I'll let you think about that for a second. I'll just start real quickly. So my name is Amy, and probably In the Bleak Midwinter is one of my favorite hymns. And when I think of poems or readings, there's nothing that's kind of outside the church for me, because our Advent traditions as a family were Advent in the church. So we didn't do a lot of extra readings, or I do have a memory of my mom sitting at the piano or at the organ. We had an organ in our house because she was a church organist. And when we were really little, she would gather us around and we would sing some of the Christmas songs and hymns. So that's why Christmas hymns hold meaning for me. Marcia, do you mind going?
So I'm Marcia Maxwell. I guess looking back, I have kind of two Christmas hymns that are very favorite. So Call Me Faithful is a tradition. And oddly enough, Silent Night. And for some that have been with the church for years and years, at the candlelight service, they would always do Silent Night, and they would kind of do it with the choir in a round, and it was just phenomenal. And every year I would look so forward to that, to go into the candlelight service and hearing that Silent Night song. And that's one of my all-time favorites. Always will be.
That's beautiful. Thanks. Maggie? Hold on, you're muted, friend. There you go.
I have so many favorites. I'm Maggie Rawle, and I think Oh Holy Night is one of my favorites. And interestingly enough, choir and the Christmas Eve service, candlelight service, was certainly an important part of that. But one of the last memories I have of my dad, who was a pastor but had a lovely baritone voice, him singing. He was sitting beside me because he was retired at that point, and I was very struck by how beautiful, powerful voice that he had. So I always remember those two together.
What a great memory. Thanks. And Kathy Ireland?
Okay.
There you go.
I'm Kathy Ireland, and yes, Oh Holy Night is one of my favorites also, but I think the thing that I look the most forward to is Silent Night, at the end of a candlelight Christmas Eve service, when everybody's actually holding up a candle. Do they do that anymore?
Yep.
I
Yep.
haven't been to the Christmas Eve services at AUMC yet, so
We violate all the fire codes and just do it.
it's just, it's just awesome, just awe-inspiring. So that would be my favorite.
Thank you. And Katie?
Let's see. Okay. So hi, I'm Katie Vigil. And I just have to tell you, The Christmas Carol is one of my most favorite books. I think I know it by heart. I've seen every movie ever made of The Christmas Carol, and I have many of them. When my brother was alive, we would get together and watch a bunch, but nobody else wants to ever do that with me. So I just do it alone. So I grew up Catholic in New Mexico, and we had midnight mass on Christmas Eve at midnight. And my mom let us / made us stay up until midnight. And we would be all dressed up and we would go to mass. And a lot of the stuff was in Spanish, so I just remember those songs. And then come home and have pozole and red chili and sopapillas.
Wow.
Before we went to bed, and that's what we had on Christmas Eve night, and then the regular turkey thing on the day. So I usually still will make pozole and red chili for Christmas Eve. I'm going to my son, so I know they'll want that, but I remember that every Christmas.
That's awesome. Thanks. I don't know if I ate red chili, if I could go to sleep. That's very cool. Jen and Barb?
We're arguing about who's gonna go first. I said her, but she's saying no. I think our video is maybe a little bit behind our talking, at least on this side, but I don't have any, for some reason I've never liked Silent Night, and I don't know why, but that was just the thing. But I was trying to think. My grandpa was a Methodist minister on a little one-room church on the Kansas prairie. We had an outhouse out back, and I'm trying to think of any of our Christmas things that we did there, but nothing was coming to mind. The main memory I have is we were living in Germany for a while. My dad was in the military, and we went to, my mom would go with these groups and meet these other military wives stationed in other countries. And she met this lady from Holland and decided we were going to go spend Christmas with her. And they had the tradition of you had to put your wooden shoes out, and you get either a switch or candy. And I just remember my dad saying, "Oh, I'm pretty sure, that you're going to get a switch," and which meant you got a spanking on Christmas morning. And I was just terrified. I just did not want Christmas to come that year. So then I had candy in my wooden shoe, so I was so thankful at that point. So
any Christmas carols?
the only Christmas carol I ever liked was this one by Garth Brooks called "The Gift."
Mhm.
I don't know why I like it. It's the only one that makes me cry every time I hear it. So, but yeah. So that's what I have.
Those are great, Jen. Thank you. What about you, Barb?
Well, hi, I'm Barb. I like The Little Drummer Boy.
Mhm.
I like songs with a good beat to it. And then in 2008, Melissa Etheridge came out with a album called A New Kind of Christmas. And one of her songs is Ring the Bells. And that's pretty moving for me. And it's about ringing the bells for peace on earth.
Yeah, she took a bunch of different Christmas songs on that album and made them non-religious,
Oh,
and took
cool.
away that sort of stuff and
Yeah.
redid them. So it's a great album.
Yeah, if you ever want to check it out, A New
Yeah.
Thought for Christmas. But on the traditional side of carols, I guess, "O Come All Ye Faithful" it just kind of, I picture all these people gathering together. And I like it when people come together.
Yeah. It's so fun on Christmas night to sing that. We usually sing that the very first to open worship, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's usually just so glorious. Yeah. Thanks to you both. So glad you're with us. Veronica?
Hello, I've got two carols in particular that I really enjoy. The first is along with everybody else, "Oh Holy Night." I don't know if you've ever heard the Josh Groban version of that, which is absolutely beautiful. But I have a lot of memories of that particular song where my husband and I would be up, madly wrapping gifts on Christmas Eve. And once everything was finally done and under the tree, and we'd sit and turn the lights down, and it was just the Christmas tree lights in the house, and very relaxed and playing the quiet music. And it was always a very peaceful time for us. So that one I have very close to my heart. And then the other one that I personally enjoy is "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." And that one I just love because I've done so many of the children's pageants at church, and it's one that I've loved to, sing with the kids, where they can just, sing it as loud as they can. And, it's just the joy of Christmas for me. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And our Christmas pageant this year is going to be on Christmas Eve morning, because this year Christmas Eve is on Sunday morning. And so our 10 o'clock service, the AUMC for a long time has traditionally had a Christmas pageant with the kids. So that'll be kind of a special treat to have that actually on Christmas Eve at 10 a.m. So
I know, and I won't be here. So we're traveling for the holiday. So, but that's okay. I'll attend church in Ohio.
But we'll get it recorded so you can see all your little bitties. That's for sure. And Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Kaufman, and my experience with "Oh Holy Night" is very similar to yours, Maggie. My dad had a really nice voice, and he didn't like to sing, but he would always sing that, and I always remember that. But more recent one that I really like is "Mary, Did You Know?" And I think Kenny Rogers and Winona Ryder maybe sang that song. I don't remember who the other person was, but I think that's a really cool song, and it really tells a story. But anyway, yeah, those are the two that I enjoy hearing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as we're getting into the season, I think it's really rich to ask those questions. It helps us get to know each other, but also kind of stirs our spirit into what makes Advent and our Christmas season meaningful. And one of the things that Matt Rawle talks about, we'll talk about a little bit tonight, is how Advent and the Christmas story kind of takes us to the past. We're in the present, takes us to the past to get ready for something that's yet to come. So it's kind of this strange mixture of past and present and future. And so Katie's really going to be able to help us with the Dickens story, but so it really, jives in a lot of ways with the whole experience of a Christmas Carol, and that juxtaposition of present, past, and future. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. So why do you think that, just from your knowledge of a Christmas Carol, why do you think using a Christmas Carol to help explore Advent works? Whether or not you've gotten a chance to start reading the book, why do you think that works? The images that come out of Christmas Carol and the things that we think about with Advent.
Well, because Scrooge has a new birth.
Right. Yeah.
As a nice person, and there's forgiveness, and there's tolerance, and there's just all kinds of and
transformation, a change from the old to the new.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
Also, it's interesting to see how it deals with regret, that the regrets people have. And you know, how their lives could have been different if only. So
It seems like there's also like stages,
Mm,
almost different acts.
mhm.
And that's a little bit, I mean, there's distinct topics for each Sunday of Advent, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know about the 25-day chocolate Advent calendars. That's a little different, but
Yeah, I saw somebody's Advent candle on social media today, and it was a bottle of wine for each day. of Advent.
my son and daughter-in-law do beer. They have
Do
a
they?
beer Advent calendar. Yep, it goes with all the beer and everything.
that sounds huge.
That's some of my earliest memories is that Advent candle. Oh, my Advent calendar. It's amazing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the Advent candle too in worship, right? There are those kind of
Yes.
stages of the journey. You know, Advent comes from the Latin word to come, you know, that something, the birth of Christ is coming. And so, you know, part of the Advent candle ritual, part of the scripture lessons that we read, they're kind of building on one another and waiting. And it helps us wait to look at that candle and to think, okay, next week we're going to have a third one, and next week we'll have a fourth one. And yeah, so there's some really neat parallels between the way a Christmas Carol is told and the unfolding of Advent. There's some other parts to this that I think that are pretty neat too, and that's the whole setting of Victorian England at the time. So in the mid-19th century, in the 1850s, when this book was written, remember Charles Dickens, what other famous books did he write?
Great Expectations.
Expectations,
You do Oliver
Okay.
Twist.
Oliver Twist, Tale of Two Cities.
Two cities, yeah.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Now, he was talking about the French Revolution in the 1700s, and Tale of Two Cities, but for Great Expectations and for Oliver Twist and for A Christmas Carol, they are all reflecting Victorian England in the time. And one of the main realities of Victorian England at that time was this growing disparity. And this is where there's such a contemporary parallel, growing disparity between the very rich and the very poor. And the working class poor made up 70 to 80% of the population at the time. So what he does in Oliver Twist and what he does even in A Christmas Carol with the story of Scrooge and then Tiny Tim's family, right, is expose this disparity of the rich being uber rich and the poor being very poor. And of course, in the 1850s in England, that was also the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when the factories and the meat packing industries and all that stuff was starting to come up, and the children that were working in those awful realities. So Tiny Tim is not just kind of the victim of the story in a way, but he's also representing not only the poverty, but also the negligence of children in those days. The other thing that's happening in the 1850s, both in England and in the United States at this time, is the beginning of the birth of social justice movement. And the idea that we have to now start creating laws for children's protection. We need to start creating laws for women. Now, interestingly, as I was doing some of my research, one of the big laws that was passed in England, in Victorian England, was that women had to be tested for sexually transmitted diseases. Why? It was kind of said it was a justice issue for women, but it was really to protect the men that were having sex with all these women. And the other duality, if you've studied Victorian culture at all, is that there was this kind of elevating of the woman as the homemaker and the woman as the pure, person, and the woman as the virtuous woman, and the alternative was that prostitution and venereal disease and STDs were just rampant at the time. It's this kind of putting women on a pedestal, but not really caring at all about them in relationships. So Dickens, you know, in all of his books, but even in the Christmas Carol, that's a part of what he's exposing, are these disparities between the haves and the have-nots, between those with a voice and those without. And a big part of his writing was seen as kind of through his poetry and through his books and things, trying to kind of expose the social ills of that culture. Have any of you done any other studies on Victorian culture in Europe at that time that you want to share out of your own understandings or readings?
I was struck by how easily Scrooge dismissed caring about the poor, and just thinking there are poorhouses and there are prisons and there's this and that takes care of it, and I don't have to worry. And that sounds like people today saying, oh no, that, you know, that's what our taxes go for, and that's as much as I'm going to care, and it's their own fault, and I'm done with it. And just wipes away guilt. So that hasn't changed since then.
And some people are doing some studies now of what culture is like on the edge of a major transformation. So they're doing historical studies on the 1600s, 15 and 1600s, when they were on the explosive edge of communications with the invention of the printing press. So in our Christian history, that was when Protestantism started. That's when the Roman Catholic Church was being challenged, right? The world, as people knew it, kind of exploded with that huge innovation. Well, same with the Industrial Revolution. There's all kinds of historical teaching about how the world dramatically changed and shifted with the Industrial Revolution. And some historians are saying we got to pay attention to those histories with AI now, that we are on the edge of something that we can't even begin to imagine. And so what's going on in our culture as we're in that emerging time? It's fascinating to kind of lay some of those other historical moments alongside of that. What's happening in our culture, what's happening in our home lives, what's happening in our churches and institutions. So there is some relevance of the Dickens culture for even teaching us today, I think. So, and the other thing that's really fascinating is the geopolitical power of England at that time was probably at its highest, right? Queen Victoria, for which the Victorian era was named, England had more power in the world than any other country, and they were pretty stable in that power. And so what happens when we kind of rest on our laurels in our political power in such a way that we begin to dismiss the disparities between the rich and the poor? So there's all kinds of stuff going on there that really speaks in many ways to the culture that we're in today. Any other reflections on that? Yeah, Maggie?
Yeah, I'm sort of haunted by saying this, but Scrooge reminds me so much of my brother-in-law. Oh my goodness. You know, and it's like I try really, really hard not to put that face on him, but it's so true. And I've known him.
There's some manifestations of his behavior without going down on him too much, but what are some things?
Just the fact that he was a pretty high manager in the federal government, and he refused to hire, let alone talk with minorities. People of color were just very much second-class citizens, and he just refused to interview them, or if he interviewed them, he never would consider them even qualified. And I was just horrified, and I still am. And I gently wanted to say, what about the fact of receiving some federal money? You know, he was a part of the receiving money from oh, what was it? He was in the service, and so he got money to go back to school. And boy, when I suggested that that was free money from the government and was similar, I tell you, he didn't want to talk to me for a week.
I bet.
I really touched a hot button. And given the family he grew up in, I try to remind myself, it's no wonder that he has some of the beliefs that he does. And my sister really loves him. So I
Yeah.
try to remind myself that, but holiday time, we're not spending it with them this year, but we frequently have in the past. And it's hard not to make that connection.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for that. So that kind of leads to the next question. What's the very first line of A Christmas Carol? Do you remember? Do you remember, Katie?
Marley was dead.
Marley was dead, right? Marley was dead. I mean, what a way to start off any kind of a writing, right? But Dickens is good at those first lines. You know, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I can't remember the first line in Oliver Twist. And what I realized was, boy, my English teachers really liked us reading about Victorian England because we had to read all of Dickens' books, I swear. but so Scrooge's business partner, Marley, was physically dead. And kind of to what Maggie was saying, Scrooge was kind of dead inside, right? Kind of as far as the way he related to people. So what's that significance of this story of being dead on the inside, or starting with death in A Christmas Carol, in a Christmas story? What might be a theological insight into that, or a way that we think about that as Christian people, starting with death and then moving towards redemption?
Kind of a resurrection.
Mhm. Mhm.
In a lot of ways, when you want to change, and then you have to shed your old self in a lot of ways. And so
Jen, would you be willing to kind of share that as you know, as you help lead a recovery group, you know, what role that kind of honesty, how that contributes to someone's ability to kind of be renewed?
well, I can only speak for myself, but personally, I mean, the person I was when I was drinking and doing drugs was the type of person who would, hit my mother and stay out all night and end up in strange locations because I'd been drinking and doing drugs with strange people, and I had to, in recovery, we talk about, you have to get to a place of being teachable. And a lot of times that's by getting beat down enough by what's going on around you that you finally come to a place that say, I can't continue to do it my way.
Right.
And so you have that change that you can shed your skin and become the person that your God wants you to become.
That's really powerful.
Well, sounds like Scrooge had the biggest intervention ever. And it was not voluntary. And
Mhm.
I mean, you know, it's like we're showing you this until you realize you need to change. And so I think I've never thought of it that way. That's a really interesting way to think about it.
And I think the whole Christmas story is that, it's a new life. You have to die to self, and God brought a new life. I mean, the old ways, the Old Testament ways really were dead, and now we're saved by grace instead of, following all the rules of the scriptures and that sort of thing. So it's really kind of, and I think as Christians, we die to self frequently,
Mhm.
or, to have that new birth.
That's truly why I think it's so vital to have recovery ministries and churches, because these are the folks who can teach us the most about doing that work in our souls and in our lives. And it's so rich. I so appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, Jen, and it really helps us think through, dying to self and rising with Christ, to use that imaging kind of from what Julie was saying too. And how kind of cool is it that the dying, the Marley was dead, is also linked to winter, right? And winter is a season of dying, of shedding, of things going dormant, but literally dying. I think Reverend Laura mentioned in one of the services about Jim Gaffigan, the entertainer, who says, we're celebrating fall and it's all about dying leaves, but that's really, we got to go through that to really understand and embrace the gift of new life and the power of resurrection. Yeah. Or redemption. Were you going to say something, Marcia? No. Okay. How do we expect Advent to come differently when we start by thinking of death first?
I would say not so much death per se. That might be a little extreme, but I do think this time of year, myself, I do a lot of reflecting on where I am, what am I doing? What am I thinking? Am I on the path I really want to be? And, so maybe not so much death, but examination, self-examination.
Yeah.
Plus, the Marley like the ghosts were great teachers.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's how I've always thought of it, as, yeah, you've got some stuff to
They
learn.
forced Scrooge to look and see himself, from the outside in. So
I think death too is like an ending for me. So when something ends, something new is going to start. And I guess curiosity starts kicking in. Like, wow, what's happening here? What's coming? Anticipation.
Well, the whole issue of death and new life, I mean, if those wise people would have gone another way, Jesus might not have lived. And his new life was fraught by impending death. I mean, all those babies that die beforehand that we don't like to talk about, but it was a part of the story.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Our cantata talks about that a lot in 2 songs.
Yeah, talk more about that, Katie. How do you express that?
We keep talking about it because you never see 2 songs in the cantata that talk about the slaying of the babies, and especially you sing it about it. It's everyone was a little jolted by that. So, and it wasn't pretty. Scrooge's past life wasn't pretty. His Cratchit's life isn't pretty. I mean, there's a lot of that in there. I'm surprised there's not more direct references to God or religion, because there really isn't. You take it and make your own comparisons, but it's not there. And maybe that's how he wanted it, to be able to reach more people and teach more that way.
It's not unlike the Wesleys, who were also from England, the founders of Methodism. They were in England in the 1700s, in the mid to late 1700s, so about 50 years before Dickens. But they were so well known for their hymns. Of course, Charles Wesley, and we're gonna look at one of those hymns as we close. Charles Wesley, John's brother, and what he often did was he used bar tunes that were familiar to people, pub tunes from England, and then set religious music, faith-based music to those pub tunes. And so there's kind of that methodology, isn't there? It's kind of an English methodology in that Victorian era of using these really tender characters in the Christmas Carol to really draw us in to a spiritual space that maybe it may have been more accessible to someone than some, if it was using all God language.
Mhm.
That itself, there's so many dissertations to spin out of this conversation, or to search and see if people have already done that kind of research. It's really fascinating. So let me pull up an image that are some words from the hold on, let me get it here, from the book. It's on page, well, we have the book, so I don't have to pull it up. It's on page 23. There's some really pithy things that I'd love to just kind of lift up and have you do some reflection on as you're doing your reflection on this reading this week. But right in the middle of page, or at the top of the page 23, is that highlighted sentence. The Advent season plays with our notion of time. The church gathers in the present to ponder the past, an ancient story of a child's birth, for a future hope. How have you found that frustrating or refreshing in your experience of Advent? Like when we sing and tell the story of a babe in Bethlehem, and somehow it's supposed to help us orient our lives for a future with hope, that God will come again, that God is present with us, whatever that affirmation is. How have you wrestled with that? Or have you found yourself frustrated by that? Because Dickens is doing that all over the place, right? In Christmas Carol. But what happens to us when we're kind of living in that space of the three experiences all together smashed into one?
I have found in my life that Advent and Christmas time have been a real reflective, obviously a real reflective time, but it seems like major changes have happened in my life at the end of the calendar year or the beginning of the new year. And so in addition to the faith stories and whatnot, there's been a lot of reflection in terms of my own personal journey during that time.
And does that reflection somehow shape your future actions and the way you make decisions about what you want?
Yeah, very definitely. Yeah, very definitely. I'm not sure I would have made some as positive decisions when I made good decisions if it hadn't have been for my faith. I'm being vague because there's so much and I don't want to get started. I'd never stop.
No, that's okay. You're not being helpful. And I think that's he's suggesting here, especially at the bottom of 23 and stuff, that in Advent, we're not called to reflect on the past to stay stuck there. But somehow there's something living and moving within that reflection that changes the way we expect and hope and live into the future. And he uses the example of the Israelites who, when Moses leads them into the promised land, they're in the wilderness for 40 years, right? And they start complaining to him and saying, it was a lot better back in Egypt. Thank you very much. We want to go back. And Moses says, no, this is a journey going forward. We're not going back ever again. And I think sometimes for Christmas and the Advent season, people can get confused because we're reading the prophets of old. We're reading Isaiah and Jeremiah, and we're reading all these old texts. We're remembering a baby born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. And it's kind of easy to kind of get stuck in that past, right? And ask the question, so what? Now what? Where are we going with this? And I think that's something we always got to think about in Advent, that we're not just kind of loving on the baby, but we're really thinking about what the impact of the Prince of Peace being born in a manger means for our world today. Does that make sense? And it's kind of weird and it's kind of hard. On page 24, I love the first full paragraph there. Advent is like living in the wilderness between what was and what will be. Living into this tension, remembering God's promises and depending on faith become spiritual disciplines that keep us from becoming Scrooges ourselves. Even though the promised land may seem far off, we hold tightly to the promises of our God, for he who promised is faithful. So it'd be really kind of fun for you this Advent to listen in worship or with the hymns that we sing. How are we remembering, but how are we leaning into a future as people who remember? Does that make sense?
Well, it seems like it takes a lot of patience because, we hold tightly to the promises of our God, but to watch them unfold takes a while. And that's where I kind of get tripped up, is wanting more like things faster. Yeah. Because like anything, it takes time,
Right,
for something to happen. And it seems the older I get, the faster time moves. Yeah, not God's time.
right. That's really insightful, Barb. Yeah.
And I find I don't want to spend time with people who don't like Christmas or think it's something special. It's like, okay, you can feel how you feel, but that's not how I want to feel. And I don't want, there's so many people that just crush. It seems to me they try to crush Christmas, and in doing that, they're crushing the spirit. And it's easy to get sucked in, and instead of trying to say, despite this, I'm going to be hopeful that this new life is coming, or, no matter how bad it gets.
Yeah. Any other reflections? You guys always teach me when I'm listening to your reflections too.
I kind of was thinking at one point, and maybe this is just because it's kind of where I'm at in life, but that Scrooge was also not, I think he was grieving the loss of his only friend and hadn't moved on from that. And I think maybe other people, could have been more loving and caring towards him too. So
That's a really new perspective,
You mean he was missing Marley?
yeah.
He had so much loss in his life, so much loss and disappointment, and apparently brought on by himself to a large extent. But does he talk about what his childhood was like, or do they start with like his time of engagement with Scrooge's past? Do they talk about his childhood at all?
Yeah, he was ignored by his father and sent to school, away to school,
And then
Yeah.
his favorite sister, was it, that died or something?
and
Yes. I was remembering the fiance, but all that happened before he had so much loss.
Yeah, and then towards the end, him having just really one friend, Marley, even though they weren't, like best of buds and happy-go-lucky, it was still the one person he had like any sort of faith in
Wow.
when he died. So
That's
Well,
what
and I think people didn't know how to deal with grief and loss. Not that we
Yeah.
know these days, but you know,
Mhm.
we didn't have a Kubler Ross around.
There was the nephew, the nephew tried.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And that, I think, must have been the child of the sister that died, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that nephew had lost his own mother,
Mhm.
but different personalities.
Amos was maybe closing himself off from feeling the pain and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of hardened him.
Yep.
And don't we know those stories? So all of a sudden there's some empathy of the humanity of Scrooge, that there's a story behind the hurt that he's not
Even Bob Cratchit, kind of understood to a certain extent that there was something in this man.
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, and even when Belle broke up with him, it was very sad because she really regretted what he was choosing to put before, ahead of everything. And she knew what kind of life he was going to have. And was just sad.
Mhm. Mhm. It makes me want to go back and reread the words.
No, I want to go read all those books now. That'll take me the rest of the spring.
we're filtering them through our midlife stories, which is so different than when I know I had to read them when I was a young teenager, and I was probably honestly reading more Cliff Notes than I remember. The Cliff Notes, I was reading those more than I was reading the real book. So true confessions.
But the Christmas Carol is not very long, so
Right.
it doesn't.
Yeah. So it might be refreshing this week in our reflective space to reread that and kind of find ourselves empathizing with the humanity of Scrooge, and maybe how we encounter others who have built up walls out of their hurts, that have been in that space, if not if we have ourselves, in fact. Yeah, beautiful. What a great group of wisdom and wise women. What I thought I'd do to close, oh gosh, here we are at 7:00, is just play a YouTube version of Come Thou Long Expected Jesus, and give you an opportunity just to listen to that and reflect on that as we close in prayer, and to see how in this hymn there's some of that being in the present, looking at the past, and envisioning a future. So I'm going to try to screen share this so we can all see that. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. You guys hear the music?
Very choppy.
From our fears and sins, time
I'm not getting that sound at all, Amy.
You guys aren't getting sound?
Nope.
No, we'll have to look at it. I think we'll just have to look at it ourselves on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
we can't hear, we can see the words, but you can just hear bits and pieces of a weird voice.
Oh, weird. Okay. So if you want to look it up on YouTube, it's Come Thou Long Expected Jesus by Red Mountain Music. And what's kind of cool about this version, I'll stop sharing, is that it's a Charles Wesley hymn. And then it was put to music later on. Can you hear me now? Okay. But there's some verses in it that are not in our hymnal. And so it's kind of fun to always hear a hymn that's familiar to us with some new words and some new melodies. So my apologies for that. So the way we close, and we've done this with my other studies, is we do chat prayer. And so I invite you to just go to the chat bubble on the bottom of your screen. Can you all see that? So along the bottom, there's all the different icons. And if you go to the chat bubble, you'll see up there, I put the number of our Zoom up there. And down at the bottom, your little bubble will want to say everyone, so that everybody can see what you chat. And we just sit in silence for just a minute and lift up any prayer, concerns, or joys. And we read that in silence, and then offer that as a prayer. Okay. And then I'll close us after that. So yeah, Jen and Barb just chatted peace. So you can do that with your own. Let us pray, my friends. We ask, O Lord, a blessing of your Spirit upon all these concerns and people and lives whom we're carrying on our heart this night. And we ask that you help us enter into a season of reflection and a season of awareness and understanding of how you're calling us to reflect on our past, that you might newly create us and redeem us for our futures that are yet to unfold. Grant us the patience we need in this in-between time. It's a time that has endured for generations on those folks still waiting on the promises that you have assured us in the scriptures and through the prophets and even in the coming of Christ. I thank you for these women and for the lives and the homes and the work that they represent. And I pray a blessing of your Spirit upon them until we meet again next week. In Jesus' name, amen. Let me just check really quickly, you all, before we get off. Do folks want to come to the church next Monday at 6, or will there be some folks who want to also Zoom in? We can do a both and.
I'll plan to come.
I'll plan to come.
I'm planning on coming.
I won't be available next Monday, so I'll, maybe I'll do the Sunday morning one.
Okay, or watch the recording, Kathy.
Oh, if that would be great. Yeah.
Okay. Jen and Barb.
We plan on coming.
Okay. How does it
Yeah.
work for Veronica and Julie?
Yep, that'll work for me.
I can
Okay.
come.
At the church at 6?
Yeah, at the church at 6. It'll be in one of the classrooms. There'll be somebody there to tell you about that. That'd be great. We'll probably still set up the Zoom in case somebody tried to get on tonight or didn't have the password. But we'll look forward to seeing most of you. We'll miss you, Kathy, but we'll record this session next week too. So, but you can also attend the Sunday morning because they're on the same schedule too.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Peace,
Good
my
night,
friends. We'll
everybody.
look forward to seeing
Peace.
you here. Bye-bye.
Bye.